She was the kind of person that you could easily predict at one point was going to be in serious trouble if he just had no idea she could turn a gun on her own father.
I thought she was trying to frame me.
You could tell she was trying to act like she didn't know what was going on and that she was just innocent. I could tell it was a put on.
Hey you guys, glad to see you back on my channel. I've got a really interesting case for you today. There are very few teenagers who have a perfect relationship with their families. After all, it's that famously rebellious time of your life when you want to be an adult, but go against the law and also still benefit from your family's house and money. It's tough on parents too, and sometimes they overreact. But other times, it's the children that overreact. Some teenagers want it all and are never pleased with their families, no matter how much they do for them. It's especially sad when parents become overwhelmed by their teenage kids' behavior and stop fighting to fix the relationship. Sooner or later, something bad is bound to happen. In the case of the Howell family, tragedy struck in 2014. Crystal Howell was a 17-year-old daredevil with a penchant for getting in trouble. But there was an unaddressed mental health issue involved, and one day, Crystal reached a breaking point. This case is about to get pretty upsetting, but if you're ready for it, let's dive in. Crystal Howell was born on August 24th, 1996 in Augusta, Georgia. She grew up with her parents, Christina and Michael, and her older sister, Sierra. They were a cool family. Michael was a sports journalist, and Christina had a keen sense of fun, which she imbued her daughters with. But when it came to Crystal, fun was an understatement. She loved getting into trouble from her very first years.
How is Crystal as a daughter and raising her?
Crystal, she was a lot of fun. She could be a lot of challenges. She would, if there was trouble to be found, she would find it. Just a lot of mischief.
Crystal might have been fun at home, but soon she developed a nasty habit outside her home. She would steal and vandalize public places, including her own school. It seemed like Crystal had zero respect for people or their property. She just wanted to cause harm. With stealing and destroying objects came lying. Of course, she would have to hide this behavior from her parents if she was to get away with it, but her urge to destroy was stronger than her desire to keep it hidden. Once, she lit her neighbor's pool cushion on fire. Needless to say, this didn't go unnoticed, and she couldn't pin the blame on anyone else. When she was caught and realized she couldn't get out of it, Crystal would just adopt a deal-with-it attitude. She was rude and defiant, and her parents didn't know how to curb this behavior or what was causing it. As Crystal grew up, her relatives and family friends would notice this troublesome behavior more and more.
There were very strange things that would happen with her when she was younger that kind of convinced most of the world that knew the Howells that Crystal had some problems.
When she was a young teen, Crystal was taken to a psychiatrist. It became clear that she was suffering from a few mental health issues, and the doctor prescribed her medication to suppress these. But there was a problem. Michael didn't agree with his young daughter taking so many meds.
He really did not want her to be on it. He thought it changed her personality.
Oftentimes, a bad personality trait comes hand in hand with a good one. Like you're cynical, but you're also very intelligent. Or you're a bit anxious, but always careful and gentle with those around you. Perhaps Michael associated Crystal's love for trouble and destruction with the fun part of her personality. She was bubbly, intense, and always eager to try something new. She was smart, curious, and outgoing. These are excellent traits to have as a teenager, and her father was afraid that the medication would turn her into a more dull person. With Michael's stance on the topic came another problem. Christina had a completely different opinion about it. In fact, she was vouching for Crystal to stick to just what the doctor prescribed and follow through with her treatment. Michael didn't like this, and he let his friend Austin know.
And he was saying that Christy's way of dealing with Crystal was to medicate her, basically put a theoretical pillow over her face to keep her quiet and to keep her in line, and he just didn't agree with that. He thought it was the cheap and easy way out.
In some cases, it is. Medication shouldn't be the very first step in addressing mental health issues. There's therapy, having a good support group, changing habits, even changing the school if that's where problems arise. But in other cases, the issues are too severe to change without chemicals. Sadly, in Crystal's case, it's simply unclear whether Christina or Michael had the better reasoning. But perhaps you'll have an answer to this by the end of the case. Trust me, it's gonna get really bad. When Crystal saw the psychiatrist, they recommended that she went to counseling as well. But again, Michael put a stop to it. So, if he didn't want his daughter on meds, why didn't he at least allow her to speak with a therapist? Where is the harm in that? Apparently, Michael had gone to therapy himself as a teenager, and he had been bullied for it. This affected him quite badly, so he didn't want his daughter to go through it as well.
He didn't want Crystal to be stigmatized.
Correct.
But imagine having such a big, unresolved argument with your partner about it. Crystal and Michael couldn't enjoy their time together anymore. Whenever they had a bit of free time, they would spend it arguing over how to raise Crystal and how to try and fix her behavioral issues.
He was constantly at odds with his wife about, the approach they should be taking with Crystal.
Weeks turned to months, turned to years, and they hadn't reached a compromise. Then, as tensions piled up between the two, one fateful night, Christina made a confession. Sierra, their oldest daughter, wasn't Michael's. Christina had had an affair, and she kept it hidden for almost 2 decades. This was a major blow for Michael. A huge betrayal of trust that he simply couldn't get over. Soon this started to show in Michael's relationship with Sierra too.
We didn't have a good relationship. He didn't want me around. I wasn't his kid.
Around 2010, Michael and Christina got a divorce. Of course, the girls were witnesses to the scandal, and it wasn't easy on them at all. Sierra picked her mom's side as she was her daughter, and Michael had been treating her quite badly since the awful news. So, from a desire to even things out, or simply following a gut feeling, Crystal teamed up with her dad. Soon enough, they packed their bags and moved to Maggie Valley, North Carolina. Just around this time, Michael had inherited a hefty sum from his parents. With it, he bought an 8-bedroom house on Sheepback Mountain. It was a beautiful wooden house surrounded by nature. The perfect place to calm down, you might think. Well, for Crystal, it simply didn't work. Not only did she continue to shoplift frequently, she also started abusing illegal substances. She would also self-harm and run away from home for days and even weeks on end, much to Michael's chagrin. He was constantly worried and less confident about being able to raise Crystal.
She'd be gone 2-3 weeks at a time sometimes.
During these trying times, Michael's only support was his friend Austin.
He said sometimes it's like she has no conscience. And I said, you mean like a sociopath? And he said, yeah, like that.
Extreme antisocial behavior is the main definition of sociopathy. It's very likely Crystal was exhibiting sociopathic tendencies. The problem was that she wasn't taking any meds or doing any sort of treatment for it. Even if he wanted Crystal to take meds now, Michael knew it was too late to convince her to do anything. When Crystal was around 16 years old, she made 2 good friends, Summer Ramsey and Taylor Metz. They were all studying at an alternative education high school.
She was very charismatic, always funny. She was really weird about her feelings. She tried to keep them in and make other people happy.
Although she didn't show her feelings a lot, it seemed like Crystal was developing into a nice young adult. She was more empathetic and seemed to contain her destructive urges more than before. Even so, being a troublemaker was still a major part of Crystal's personality in high school.
I was really good in school. I never really had experience with anyone who had like a history of trouble or anything. And when I met Crystal, it was just like, oh, there's like that teenage rebellion I'm supposed to have.
Taylor was not only fascinated by Crystal's devil-may-care personality, she was also surprised to see just how close she was to her father.
When I looked at their relationship, that's what I wanted to have.
They were best friends. He loved her, she loved him. Even though he was strict on her, she still adored her father.
Was this true though? Do you know how relationships can look perfectly happy from the outside and be a total wreck in reality? For Crystal, her relationship with Michael might not have been as close as her friends saw it. She hated that he was strict with her and could never see that he was only behaving this way out of fear. Imagine your child disappearing for 3 weeks, then coming back home. Wouldn't you try to impose some stricter rules to prevent this from happening again? Crystal couldn't put herself in her father's shoes. In fact, she seemed to have zero empathy. You'll see why. It was February 2014, and Michael took Crystal grocery shopping at a local store. But within minutes inside the store, Michael caught Crystal shoplifting again.
And he caught her shoplifting and made her apologize, and they went back home.
Crystal felt humiliated. She was angry at Michael for making her apologize, and she was angry at him for telling him what to do. This would be the last time her dad would tell her off, she decided. When they got home, Michael laid down on the sofa for a nap. Crystal went upstairs and had a shower. Then she grabbed her dad's gun and came downstairs. She shot him in the head. Now no one could tell her what to do. Crystal spent the whole night wondering what to tell other people about her dad. First, she told her friends that Michael was on a prolonged business trip to Georgia. She asked Taylor if she could crash at hers for a week or two until he returned. Of course, Taylor and her family had no problems with it, but they had no idea what Crystal had done. But within a few days, Christina called her daughter.
And it was about 2 or 3 days into her being over there when we came home from school and her mom called her. And that was when her mom told her that her dad had himself.
Yep, Crystal made up a whole phone call in front of her friends so that they would believe this terrible story. Michael had taken his own life in Georgia and she would never see him again. It wasn't just a fake phone call. It was a whole scene, perfectly acted in front of Summer and Taylor.
She's like crying hysterically and she's trembling and she's, my dad killed himself. What do I do? What do I do? He killed himself.
For the rest of the evening, the two girls gave Crystal all the tender, loving care that they could. Then they spent the night thinking about plans ahead. By the next morning, they got a brilliant idea. They would all move into Crystal's 8-bedroom home. It was empty, and the girls figured Crystal would benefit from some good company in these trying times.
She was like, yeah, that works out perfect. And like, everyone was excited.
Little did they know that Michael was stuffed inside a plastic barrel in the shed behind the house.
Is she grieving at all?
I mean, I guess in her own weird Crystal way, she seemed a little bit messed up about it.
Perhaps Summer and Taylor thought Crystal simply wasn't showing her emotions about the loss of her father. After all, she was known not to let her feelings out. Plus, many people deal with loss by distracting themselves with their busy lives. In Crystal's case, it wasn't a busy life, but 24/7 partying. She even had a stripper pole installed in the living room. There wouldn't be a day that Crystal wouldn't have people over at her place. She would keep them drunk and happy. But where did she get all the money? Well, from Michael's bank account.
She did have his bank card, so she would pay the bills and like the lights and her phone bill and stuff like that. And she would buy everybody food.
Well, not just food.
She brought into the house.
What kind of are we talking?
It was
Indeed, Crystal was dabbling in the worst possible substances and was inviting other teenagers to do so too. It wasn't necessarily that Crystal threw daily parties, it was more like one big prolonged party where people would come and go as they pleased. At one point, it turned into an uncontrollable fiesta.
There was like 50 people there, more than what we ever wanted.
And with strong illegal substances on the table, you can only imagine how everyone's behavior spiraled. At one point, Summer noticed that Crystal was acting strangely too. Someone had slipped her something bad in a drink.
She was acting crazy, she was out of the world, not the Crystal that I know. She was just kind of hallucinating.
There was just kind of like smoke drifting in the air sometimes. And she would see smoke clouds and she would say, oh my gosh, it's my dad.
Once again, Summer and Taylor ended up taking care of Crystal for the rest of the night. Then, for the next 2 weeks. The party was over and everyone was gone, bar her best friends. But Crystal was not the same. She had abused several illegal substances, and the worst kind. She was hardly in a functional state.
She sat in a chair for 2 weeks and did not move.
For 2 solid weeks.
Yes.
Summer and Taylor became the worried parents that Crystal didn't have anymore. Finally, she had reached an all-time low, a place she was headed for a long time, but couldn't reach as Michael enforced his rules. Where could you go after taking your dad's life, throwing a week-long party, then succumbing to an induced mental breakdown? To your mom, as it turns out. When Crystal started to recover, Summer and Taylor moved on to other chapters of their lives, school and family included. Around this time, Crystal spoke with her mom. She decided she would go and live with her and Sierra for a while. Crystal told Summer she would go away for about 6 months, so if she and Taylor wanted, they could stay at her house for the whole period.
Yeah, she told me we could stay up there and that she would pay for the electric, and that if we needed help with food or anything, to contact her. She said I'll be back after my birthday.
But there was one strict rule. Summer and Taylor couldn't go near the shed in the back of the garden.
She just asked us to stay away from it. This is her exact words. That's where me and my dad went to hang out, and that's special to me. So we just kind of stayed away from it.
Of course, why not respect your friend's wish? She must still be suffering after losing her father, they thought. So Crystal packed all her belongings and put them in the trunk of Michael's Land Rover. Then she withdrew $3,000 in cash from Michael's card. She waved her friends goodbye and drove off to Georgia. But as soon as she was gone, Summer ended up breaking the only rule.
She had this pinball machine downstairs, and she had told us that we could sell it. We were bringing it back because we didn't end up selling it. So we were bringing it back, and I was like, why would we move it all the way back downstairs? So we just popped the lock off of the shed. You could smell it as soon as you opened the door.
Summer and Taylor were afraid to even think where the smell was coming from, but they had to know. Something was not right, and they knew it.
I just opened it like this, and I was standing right about here, and there was one blue bin in this corner, and I just walked in, I looked, and that was all I needed to know.
Michael's month-old body was folded into the fetal position and stuffed inside a plastic bin. A part of his head was missing, as his daughter had him. Summer didn't realize who it was at first. She thought it might have been someone from the massive party that had taken place a few weeks prior. Perhaps something horrible happened and Crystal tried to conceal it. But a closer look revealed the awful truth behind it all. Crystal had shot her dad and hid him in the shed for a whole month, all the while partying and using his money on illegal substances. Scared and disgusted, Summer ran straight to the local sheriff's office.
In those moments, did you think she had done that?
Yes, I did. I thought she was trying to frame me.
You?
Yes, that was initially what I thought. I was scared.
Because she's nowhere to be found and you're on the property.
Yeah, it looked bad.
Fortunately, no one thought Summer had done this. The police quickly arrived on the scene, evaluated all the clues, and they knew they had to arrest Crystal Howell as soon as possible.
It evolved to the point where we were able to identify the suspect, Mrs. Crystal Brooke Howell, as the suspect.
But she was no longer in North Carolina. In fact, she was already in Augusta, Georgia at her mom's place.
I was on my way to work and I actually saw the car in the parking lot, and I pulled over, talked to her. But she wasn't her normal self. She was not wanting to be touched when you tried to hug her.
Sierra had met Crystal too, and she got the exact same strange feeling about her. Crystal had always been a troublemaker, but she was a warm, friendly sister. Now she was different.
It was weird. It was really uncomfortable. She looked like she had no soul. She looked like there was nobody in there.
In the conversation?
No conversation, really. She said hello, and that was basically it.
After visiting her family, Crystal went to sleep at a local motel. That's where the police found her and took her into custody for the first-degree murder of her father.
What was the scenario when you first rolled up?
She was very quiet to begin with, and was acting, and when I say acting, I do mean acting, because you could tell she was trying to act like she didn't know what was going on and that she was just innocent. I could tell it was a put on.
Yeah, police officers have dealt with a lot of crime. They can usually tell when someone is lying. So Crystal was arrested and taken to the police station in Augusta.
I was able to watch live as they were talking to her, and just her demeanor, the way she was just nonchalant about everything, it would send chills through your spine. I mean, very cold-hearted.
It was pretty hard to watch, even as a police officer, how a 17-year-old girl blatantly admitted to killing her father and partying for a whole month afterward. Needless to say, the news arrived on Christina's doorstep within hours. Tragically, she was as shocked as she was disappointed. She had seen her daughter behave more and more badly over the years, and she knew that the lack of proper treatment would have terrible consequences. She was just hoping it wouldn't get as bad as it did. Poor Michael had a right to live, and had done all he could to love and support his daughter. Christina immediately drove down to the police station to talk to Crystal. As soon as she saw her mom, Crystal wanted to show her affection.
She gave me a hug and she said, "I didn't mean to do it." That's the only thing she said.
Crystal went on to tell the police detectives how she fired at her dad in the head while he slept, and she moved him to the shed and stuffed him in a plastic barrel. She also told them how she invited her friends over to her house, acted like Michael had taken his life, and threw big parties inside the house. Imagine having to live with the knowledge that someone close in your family did something like this. How do you recover from this? What's even more tragic, perhaps, is that there were so many red flags around Crystal ever since she was a little kid. Her parents saw these signs and they did their best to help her get better, but they never imagined the lengths she'd go to preserve her freedom to get into trouble.
She was the kind of person that you could easily predict at one point was going to be in serious trouble if you just had no idea she could turn a gun on her own father.
Once in prison, Crystal saw a psychiatrist and they diagnosed her with several severe mental disorders. Many of these were discovered when she was a young teen, but remember, Michael was sternly against his daughter taking medication.
He wanted a solution that didn't involve her. And as wonderful a thought as that was, and unfortunately, I think cost him his life.
Cases like these are always made sadder by the thought that they could have been, one way or another, prevented.
I think had she been treated and medicated from 8, 9, 10 years old, maybe her brain may have functioned in a different way. She was not given that opportunity. So as a parent, I failed in that aspect.
Crystal accepted a plea deal and will spend a minimum of 30 years in prison. Meanwhile, her friends and family will have to take it one day at a time to try and cope with the pain that she left behind. Hey, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and if you did, make sure to click on that like button and subscribe for more. As always, till next time, and stay safe.